You're a young Egyptian living 4,000 years ago along the fertile banks of the Nile. The sun is setting, casting golden reflections on the sacred river, and you've just spotted someone who makes your heart race faster than a chariot heading into battle. But how do you approach them? What are the rules? What would a first date even look like in a world of pharaohs, pyramids, and papyrus? Welcome back to the channel, history lovers. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we dive deep into the most fascinating aspects of ancient history that you won't find anywhere else. And if you enjoy today's content, smash that like button to help us reach more people who love exploring the past. Today we're exploring one of the most captivating aspects of ancient Egyptian life that rarely gets the attention it deserves: romance, dating, and relationships in the land of the pharaohs. Forget everything you think you know about ancient civilizations being stuffy and restrictive, because ancient Egypt might just surprise you with how progressive and passionate their approach to love really was. We're going to explore every intimate detail of what it was like to find love, court someone special, and navigate relationships in one of history's most remarkable civilizations. From the steamy love poetry that would make modern romance novels blush, to the surprisingly modern dating customs that existed thousands of years before Tinder, we're about to discover that when it came to matters of the heart, the ancient Egyptians were far more like us than you might imagine. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and let's take a romantic journey back in time to discover what love was really like along the Nile. Before we dive into the butterflies and first kisses, we need to understand the social landscape that shaped every romantic encounter in ancient Egypt. Unlike many ancient civilizations where women were treated as property, Egyptian society was remarkably progressive when it came to gender equality, and this had profound implications for how relationships developed. In ancient Egypt, both men and women had legal rights that were virtually unheard of in other contemporary civilizations. Women could own property, conduct business, initiate divorce, and most importantly for our story, they had significant say in choosing their marriage partners. This wasn't a society where fathers simply sold their daughters to the highest bidder. Though practical considerations certainly played a role, genuine affection and compatibility were highly valued. The concept of true love wasn't just a romantic ideal in Egypt, it was considered essential for a successful marriage. Egyptian wisdom literature repeatedly emphasizes that a happy home requires mutual respect and genuine affection between spouses. The famous Instructions of Ptah-hotep, a text that served as a guide for proper living, advised young men to love your wife with ardor and to treat her with kindness and respect. But here's where it gets interesting. The path to marriage wasn't the same for everyone. Your social class, profession, and family connections all influenced how you would meet potential partners and conduct courtship. Let's break this down by social groups. For the royal family and highest nobility, marriages were often diplomatic arrangements, but even these unions frequently began with genuine attraction and courtship. We have numerous examples of pharaohs and queens who clearly adored each other, like Akhenaten and Nefertiti, whose artistic representations show an unusually intimate and affectionate relationship for royal depictions. The middle class, scribes, craftsmen, merchants, and lower-level officials had the most freedom in their romantic choices. These were the people who left us the most vivid accounts of courtship and dating, because they were literate enough to record their experiences, but not so constrained by political necessity that they couldn't follow their hearts. For farmers and laborers who made up the majority of the population, courtship was often more practical, but no less meaningful. These relationships typically developed within small communities where everyone knew everyone else's family, creating a natural vetting process for potential partners. What's fascinating is that regardless of social class, the Egyptians believed that the gods themselves were invested in successful romantic relationships. Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and beauty, was actively invoked by lovers seeking to win someone's heart or ensure a happy marriage. Young people would visit her temples, leave offerings, and pray for guidance in matters of love. The legal framework supporting relationships was also surprisingly modern. Marriage contracts existed that protected both parties' interests, and women retained their property rights even after marriage. Divorce, while not taken lightly, was available to both men and women for various reasons, including incompatibility, infidelity, or simply falling out of love. This social foundation created an environment where genuine courtship could flourish. Unlike societies where marriages were purely transactional, Egyptians expected their relationships to be built on mutual attraction, respect, and affection. This expectation shaped every aspect of how people approached dating and courtship. Now that we understand the social framework, let's talk about attraction itself. How did ancient Egyptians make themselves appealing to potential partners? What were the beauty standards, and how much effort did people put into their appearance when they were hoping to catch someone's eye? The answer might surprise you. Ancient Egyptians were absolutely obsessed with personal grooming and appearance, perhaps even more than we are today. Beauty wasn't just about vanity. It was considered a reflection of one's moral character and spiritual purity. The Egyptians believed that physical beauty was a gift from the gods, and maintaining it was both a privilege and a responsibility. Let's start with the basics: cleanliness. In a desert climate along a muddy river, staying clean was both challenging and essential. Wealthy Egyptians bathed multiple times a day using natron soap, a natural cleaning agent that was both antibacterial and deodorizing. They understood the connection between cleanliness and attractiveness long before germ theory existed. For both men and women, smooth, hairless skin was the ultimate beauty standard. They used bronze tweezers, pumice stones, and even early forms of waxing to remove unwanted body hair. Men typically shaved their faces daily, and often their entire heads, while women removed all body hair except for carefully shaped eyebrows. The famous Egyptian eye makeup wasn't just for aesthetic purposes, it served practical functions too. Kohl, made from galena and malachite, protected the eyes from the harsh desert sun and helped prevent eye infections. But the way it was applied was pure artistry. Both men and women lined their eyes with dramatic black kohl, extending the lines beyond the natural eye shape to create an elongated, alluring look that we still associate with Egyptian beauty today. Hair was another crucial element of attraction. Since most people shaved their heads for hygiene, elaborate wigs became the ultimate fashion statement. These weren't simple hairpieces. They were intricate works of art made from human hair, sometimes imported from as far away as India. The wealthy had multiple wigs for different occasions, shorter, practical styles for daily wear, and elaborate shoulder-length pieces for special events and romantic encounters. Jewelry played a massive role in attraction and courtship. Gold was abundant in Egypt, and skilled craftsmen created stunning pieces that served as both personal adornment and displays of wealth and status. Young people would save for months to buy a special piece of jewelry to wear when courting someone they admired. Amulets were also popular, particularly those associated with love and fertility. Perfume and scented oils were essential for anyone hoping to make a romantic impression. The Egyptians were master perfumers, creating complex fragrances from imported spices, flowers, and resins. Both men and women wore perfume daily, and offering someone a vial of precious scent was considered a deeply romantic gesture. Clothing styles varied by social class, but everyone understood the power of dress to attract attention. Linen was the fabric of choice due to the hot climate, and the finest linen was so sheer it was almost transparent. Young people would invest in their finest garments when attending festivals or social gatherings where they might meet potential partners. But here's what's really interesting. The beauty standards weren't impossibly narrow. Egyptian art shows people of various body types being celebrated as attractive. While fitness and health were valued, there wasn't the extreme emphasis on thinness that we see in some modern cultures. Curves were considered beautiful, and both men and women were expected to maintain healthy, strong bodies, rather than conform to a single ideal. The time and resources people invested in their appearance for courtship purposes was substantial. Archaeological evidence shows that even middle-class households had extensive collections of cosmetics, jewelry, and grooming tools. Young people would spend hours preparing for social events, and the ritual of getting ready was often a social activity in itself, with friends helping each other achieve the perfect look. What's perhaps most striking is how similar their approach to attraction was to ours today. They understood that confidence, personal style, and taking care of yourself were key to romantic success. The specific beauty standards may have been different, but the underlying psychology of attraction was remarkably consistent with modern behavior. So you've spent hours perfecting your appearance, your kohl is immaculate, your wig is styled to perfection, and you're wearing your finest linen and most attractive jewelry. But where exactly did young Egyptians go to meet potential romantic partners? How did the initial connections happen in a world without dating apps, speed dating, or even coffee shops? The answer is that ancient Egyptian society provided numerous natural opportunities for young people to meet and interact, often in settings that were both socially acceptable and romantically charged. Let's explore the most important venues where love connections were made. Religious festivals were by far the most significant social events for meeting potential partners. Egypt had dozens of major festivals throughout the year, each one bringing together people from across social classes and geographic regions. The Festival of Hathor, goddess of love, was particularly popular with young singles. These festivals could last for days and included music, dancing, feasting, and plenty of opportunities for flirtation and courtship. During the Festival of the Nile's flooding, which marked the new year, young people would gather along the riverbanks to celebrate and participate in ceremonies. The atmosphere was festive and romantic, with flower garlands, perfumed oils, and elaborate costumes. Many couples traced their first meetings to these annual celebrations. The marketplace was another crucial venue for romantic connections. Egyptian markets weren't just places of commerce. They were social hubs where people gathered to exchange news, gossip, and glances with attractive strangers. Young women would often volunteer to do the household shopping, knowing they might encounter interesting young men at the market. Similarly, young men would find excuses to linger at market stalls, hoping to strike up conversations with appealing women. Religious temples served multiple social functions beyond worship. Many temples had schools attached to them, and young people from different families would meet while receiving education. Temple ceremonies also provided opportunities for social interaction, particularly during the frequent religious processions that wound through city streets. For the wealthy, banquets and dinner parties were elaborate social events designed partly for matchmaking. Wealthy families would invite other prominent families to feast, drink, and enjoy entertainment, all while their unmarried children had opportunities to meet and evaluate potential partners. These events could be quite sophisticated, with professional musicians, dancers, and elaborate menus designed to impress guests. The Nile River itself was a romantic setting for many first encounters. Boat parties were popular among the upper classes, with groups of young people sailing along the river while musicians played and couples found opportunities for private conversations. The river was also where many people went to collect water, wash clothes, or simply cool off during hot afternoons, creating natural opportunities for casual meetings. Craft workshops and professional guilds provided another venue for connections, particularly among the middle classes. Young scribes might meet at the House of Life, ancient libraries and schools, while craftsmen and their families would interact during guild celebrations and professional gatherings. But perhaps most importantly, the extended family network played a crucial role in introductions. Egyptian families were large and well-connected, and relatives frequently introduced young people to potential partners from suitable families. These weren't arranged marriages in the oppressive sense. Rather, they were social introductions that could lead to genuine courtship if mutual attraction developed. What's fascinating is how these meetings were facilitated by what we might call wingmen and wingwomen. Friends and siblings actively helped each other meet attractive people, sharing information about who was available, who might be interested, and what someone's preferences were. The social network was incredibly important for romantic success. The actual approach varied depending on the setting and social class. At festivals, it was acceptable for young men to approach women directly, often by offering to share food or drink, or by asking them to dance. In more formal settings like banquets, introductions were typically made through mutual friends or family members. Eye contact and body language played crucial roles in these initial connections. Egyptians were sophisticated in their understanding of nonverbal communication, and young people became skilled at signaling interest or availability through glances, gestures, and positioning. A woman might signal interest by adjusting her jewelry or touching her hair, while a man might offer assistance with carrying something or find excuses to be helpful. Music and dancing were particularly important for breaking the ice. Most social gatherings included musical entertainment, and dancing together was an acceptable way for couples to have physical contact and gauge their compatibility. Many relationships began on dance floors, at religious festivals, or private parties. The role of intermediaries was also significant. Professional matchmakers existed, particularly for wealthy families, but even among common people, older women in the community often served informal matchmaking roles, keeping track of who was available and who might be compatible. Once initial contact was made, how did ancient Egyptians express their romantic feelings? This is where things get really fascinating, because the Egyptians left us an incredible wealth of love poetry and romantic literature that reveals just how passionate and sophisticated their approach to courtship really was. Egyptian love poetry is some of the most beautiful and sensual romantic writing ever created, and it provides us with intimate insights into how people expressed desire, longing, and affection thousands of years ago. These weren't just formal literary exercises, they were real expressions of genuine emotion that people shared with their romantic interests. The most famous collection is known as the Egyptian love songs, dating from around 1300 to 1100 BCE, during the New Kingdom period. These poems were written on papyrus and ostraca, pottery shards, and reveal a world of passionate romance that would be familiar to anyone who's ever been in love. Let me share some examples of how Egyptians expressed romantic feelings. One young man wrote, "The voice of the wild goose calls out, it is caught by the bait. Your love holds me back, I cannot release it. I shall take away my nets, but what do I tell my mother, to whom I return every day loaded with game? I have set no traps today. Your love has caught me." The imagery here is sophisticated and emotionally complex. The poet compares himself to a wild goose caught by bait, suggesting that love is both a trap and a choice. He's torn between his responsibilities, hunting to provide for his family, and his overwhelming feelings for his beloved. Women's voices are equally represented in these love poems, which is remarkable for ancient literature. One young woman wrote, "I wish I were the ring on your finger, the one that possesses your heart." Another declares, "My heart remembers your love. Half of my hair is falling over my face, but I do not fix it. I will go to him immediately." These poems reveal that Egyptian courtship involved intense emotional and physical longing. The lovers describe sleepless nights, loss of appetite, and an inability to concentrate on daily tasks, all symptoms of what we now recognize as the early stages of romantic love. The poetry also shows that Egyptians weren't shy about expressing physical desire. One poem describes a woman saying, "I wish to be with you alone, that you might hear the cry of joy from my mouth, that I might show you my beauty." Another poet writes, "To kiss her lips is better than wine and bread." But these expressions of passion were balanced with genuine emotional intimacy. The poems frequently emphasize the beloved's character, intelligence, and personality, not just physical beauty. One lover writes, "She is more beautiful than any woman. She is like a star rising at the beginning of a good year." The exchange of love poems was itself a crucial part of courtship. Young people would compose verses for their romantic interests, either writing them personally if they were literate, or commissioning scribes to help them express their feelings. Receiving a love poem was a significant romantic gesture that indicated serious interest. Music played an equally important role in romantic expression. Many of these poems were meant to be sung, accompanied by harps, lutes, and flutes. Young people would serenade their interests, sometimes gathering outside their homes in the evening to perform romantic songs. The ability to sing or play an instrument was considered extremely attractive in potential partners. The Egyptians also developed a sophisticated symbolic language for expressing romantic feelings. Flowers had specific meanings. Lotus blossoms represented rebirth and eternal love, while mandrakes were associated with fertility and passion. Young people would send bouquets with carefully selected flowers to communicate their intentions and feelings. Letters were another important medium for romantic communication. We have surviving papyrus letters between lovers that show how couples maintained their relationships when separated by distance or circumstances. These letters are remarkably intimate and personal, discussing everything from daily activities to deep emotional longings. The language used in these romantic communications was often elaborate and metaphorical. Lovers compared each other to precious metals, beautiful animals, and natural phenomena. The beloved might be described as more precious than gold, graceful as a gazelle, or bright as the rising sun. Religious imagery was also frequently incorporated into romantic expression. Lovers would invoke various gods and goddesses in their poetry, asking for divine blessing on their relationships or comparing their beloved to divine beings. This wasn't considered blasphemous. Rather, it elevated romantic love to a sacred level. What's striking about Egyptian love poetry is how it balances passion with tenderness, desire with respect, and physical attraction with emotional connection. These weren't crude expressions of lust, but sophisticated explorations of the full spectrum of romantic feeling. The tradition of romantic poetry and music also created a shared cultural vocabulary for love. Young people grew up hearing these songs and poems, learning how to express their own feelings and what to expect from romantic relationships. This cultural foundation helped shape expectations and behaviors around courtship and dating. With the social foundations in place and the language of love established, let's dive into the actual practices of courtship. What did a typical date look like in ancient Egypt? How did couples spend time together during the courtship process? And what were the social rules and expectations that governed these interactions? Egyptian courtship was a delicate balance between personal desire and social propriety. While the culture was relatively permissive compared to many ancient civilizations, there were still clear expectations about how unmarried couples should behave, particularly regarding physical intimacy and public displays of affection. The concept of chaperoned courtship was common, especially for young women from respectable families. However, this didn't mean that couples couldn't have meaningful private time together. The chaperoning was often quite relaxed, with older family members or friends providing a nominal presence while allowing the couple space for genuine conversation and connection. One of the most popular courtship activities was taking walks along the Nile, particularly during cooler evening hours. These riverside strolls provided opportunities for private conversation while remaining in public view, satisfying both the couple's desire for intimacy and society's expectations for propriety. Couples would often bring simple refreshments, bread, fruit, or beer, and find scenic spots to sit and talk. Garden parties and picnics were elaborate courtship rituals among the wealthy. Egyptian gardens were designed as romantic settings, with pools, pavilions, and carefully cultivated flowers and trees. Young people would gather in these beautiful spaces for afternoon or evening entertainment, with music, games, and plenty of opportunities for couples to pair off for more intimate conversations. Boat excursions on the Nile were particularly popular among courting couples. The river provided a romantic setting, and the privacy of a small boat allowed for more intimate conversation than was possible in most other social settings. These trips often included fishing, bird watching, or simply enjoying the scenery while getting to know each other better. Religious festivals provided numerous opportunities for courtship activities. During major celebrations, normal social restrictions were often relaxed, allowing young people more freedom to interact. Couples might dance together, share special festival foods, or participate in religious ceremonies side by side. The festive atmosphere and special clothing made these events particularly romantic. Gift-giving was an essential part of Egyptian courtship, but it followed specific customs and expectations. Men typically gave gifts to women they were courting, but women also gave gifts to men they favored. The most common gifts included jewelry, perfumes, cosmetics, fine clothing, or food items. The value and thoughtfulness of gifts were carefully noted by both the recipient and the community. Flowers held special significance in courtship rituals. Young men would present bouquets to women they admired, with different flowers carrying different meanings. Lotus blossoms were particularly prized for their association with rebirth and eternal love. Women might wear specific flowers in their hair to signal their availability or interest in particular suitors. Music and dance played crucial roles in courtship. Young people were expected to have at least basic musical skills, and the ability to sing, dance, or play an instrument was considered highly attractive. Couples would often bond over shared musical interests, and serenading was a common romantic gesture. Shared meals were important courtship activities, but they were carefully structured according to social customs. A young man might invite a woman and her family to dine with his family, or couples might share food during festivals or social gatherings. The act of sharing food was considered intimate and significant, often marking a serious stage in the courtship process. Intellectual compatibility was highly valued in Egyptian courtship. Couples would engage in games, riddles, and discussions about literature, religion, and current events. The ability to hold interesting conversations was considered essential for a successful marriage, so courtship provided opportunities to assess mental compatibility alongside physical attraction. Physical contact during courtship was regulated but not completely prohibited. Hand-holding was acceptable in certain contexts, and dancing allowed for appropriate physical interaction. However, more intimate physical contact was generally reserved for engaged or married couples, though the actual enforcement of these standards varied considerably based on social class and individual family attitudes. The duration of courtship varied widely depending on circumstances. Some couples married quickly after meeting, particularly if their families were eager to formalize the relationship for economic or social reasons. Others courted for months or even years, especially if they were young or if there were practical obstacles to marriage. Seasonal patterns influenced courtship activities. The flooding season, summer, was often considered the most romantic time of year, with numerous festivals and celebrations providing opportunities for social interaction. The harvest season brought different types of gatherings and celebrations, while the dry season offered the best weather for outdoor activities. Community involvement in courtship was significant but generally supportive rather than restrictive. Neighbors, friends, and extended family members often served as informal advisors, helping young people navigate the complexities of romantic relationships and providing guidance on everything from gift selection to appropriate behavior. While Egyptian courtship allowed for significant personal choice and romantic freedom, families and social networks played crucial roles in shaping and supporting romantic relationships. Understanding these dynamics is essential to comprehending how dating really worked in ancient Egypt. Egyptian families were typically large, extended networks that included not just parents and siblings, but also grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even close family friends who were considered honorary relatives. This extensive network meant that most romantic relationships developed within a web of existing social connections, providing both opportunities and oversight. Parents generally had significant influence over their children's romantic choices, but this influence was usually exercised through guidance and advice rather than absolute control. Egyptian wisdom literature emphasizes that parents should help their children find suitable partners while respecting their preferences and feelings. The goal was to ensure both romantic happiness and practical compatibility. Mothers played particularly important roles in their daughters' courtship experiences. They would teach young women about relationships, help them prepare for social events, advise them on evaluating potential suitors, and serve as intermediaries in negotiations with suitors' families. Mothers also provided crucial emotional support during the often turbulent process of falling in love. Fathers were more involved in the practical aspects of courtship, particularly regarding the suitability of potential sons-in-law. They would investigate suitors' families, assess their economic prospects, and ensure that any potential marriage would be advantageous for their daughters. However, Egyptian fathers were generally expected to respect their daughters' feelings and not force unwanted marriages. Siblings often served as confidants, advisors, and even matchmakers for each other. Brothers might introduce their sisters to suitable friends, while sisters would help brothers understand what women found attractive. The close relationships between siblings created natural support networks for navigating romantic relationships. Extended family members frequently played matchmaking roles, introducing young people from different families who might be compatible. Aunts and uncles were particularly active in this regard, often serving as neutral parties who could facilitate introductions without the emotional intensity that might come from parental involvement. The concept of family honor was important, but not oppressive in Egyptian courtship. Families wanted their children to form relationships that would bring credit to the family name, but this generally meant finding partners who were decent, respectable people rather than focusing solely on wealth or status. Character and reputation were considered more important than pure economic advantage. Economic considerations were certainly part of family involvement in courtship, but they were balanced against emotional and personal factors. Families would consider the economic prospects of potential marriages, but wealthy Egyptians frequently married for love even when more economically advantageous matches were available. The negotiation of marriage terms was typically handled by families rather than the couples themselves, but the couple's wishes were usually given significant weight in these discussions. Parents would work out details regarding property, inheritance, and household arrangements, while the couple focused on building their emotional relationship. Social networks extended far beyond immediate family to include friends, neighbors, professional colleagues, and religious communities. These broader networks provided additional opportunities for meeting potential partners and offered different perspectives on relationship decisions. Professional networks were particularly important for middle-class Egyptians. Scribes, craftsmen, merchants, and other professionals formed tight-knit communities that often intermarried. These professional connections provided natural venues for meeting compatible partners who shared similar educational backgrounds and career interests. Religious communities also played significant roles in courtship. People who worshipped at the same temples or participated in the same religious festivals often formed romantic connections. Religious leaders sometimes served as informal advisors on relationship matters, though they rarely attempted to control personal romantic choices. Neighborhood communities were especially important for working-class Egyptians, who might have limited opportunities to meet people outside their immediate geographic area. Local festivals, market days, and community work projects provided venues for social interaction and potential romantic connections. The concept of suitable matches was more flexible in Egyptian society than in many ancient cultures. While families preferred marriages within similar social classes, love matches that crossed class boundaries were not uncommon and were generally accepted if the individuals involved were of good character. Age differences in relationships were generally accepted, though extreme disparities were discouraged. Most couples were within a few years of each other's age, and marriages between teenagers and much older adults were relatively rare except in cases of economic necessity or political advantage. Divorce and remarriage were socially acceptable, which meant that family networks had to adapt to changing relationship status. Divorced individuals could count on family support in finding new partners, and children from previous marriages were typically welcomed into new family units. The support that families and social networks provided during courtship extended into marriage itself. Young couples could rely on their extended networks for practical help, emotional support, and guidance as they established their own households and started their own families. One of the most intriguing aspects of ancient Egyptian dating culture was their approach to physical intimacy during courtship. Unlike many ancient civilizations that were extremely restrictive about premarital physical contact, Egyptian society had a more nuanced and surprisingly liberal approach that recognized natural human desires while maintaining social boundaries. The Egyptian understanding of sexuality was fundamentally different from the repressive attitudes we often associate with ancient cultures. They viewed sexual desire as a natural, healthy part of human life that the gods had created for both procreation and pleasure. This attitude influenced how they approached physical intimacy during courtship. Egyptian medical texts, including the famous Edwin Smith Papyrus and Ebers Papyrus, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of human sexuality and reproduction. They recognized that sexual compatibility was important for successful marriages and didn't view physical desire as shameful or inappropriate when expressed within acceptable social contexts. However, this doesn't mean that ancient Egypt was a free-for-all when it came to premarital intimacy. There were clear social expectations and boundaries, though these varied significantly based on social class, family attitudes, and individual circumstances. For respectable families, particularly those of higher social status, young women were expected to remain virgins until marriage. This wasn't based on religious doctrine as much as practical considerations. Virginity was seen as a valuable asset that could enhance a woman's marriage prospects and ensure legitimate heirs. However, the enforcement of this expectation was less rigid than in many other cultures. Young men faced different expectations. While they weren't required to remain celibate before marriage, they were expected to be discreet about their sexual experiences and to treat women respectfully. Promiscuity was discouraged, but some sexual experience before marriage was considered normal and even desirable. The boundaries around physical intimacy during courtship were flexible and context-dependent. Light physical contact, holding hands, brief embraces, or kisses was generally acceptable during serious courtship, particularly if the couple was engaged or close to engagement. More intimate contact was typically reserved for couples who had made formal commitments to each other. Dancing provided socially acceptable opportunities for physical contact between courting couples. Egyptian dances often involved close partner interaction, allowing couples to experience physical attraction and chemistry within culturally appropriate boundaries. The sensual nature of much Egyptian dance was celebrated rather than condemned. Private moments between courting couples were possible, though they were typically brief and often occurred in semi-public settings where others were nearby, even if not directly supervising. Gardens, temples, and riverside locations provided opportunities for intimate conversations and limited physical contact. The concept of engagement or betrothal created a different set of expectations around physical intimacy. Once a couple had made formal commitments to each other and their families had agreed to the marriage, more intimate physical contact became acceptable, though actual sexual intercourse was typically reserved for after the wedding ceremony. Egyptian love poetry reveals that sexual desire and anticipation were openly acknowledged and celebrated. The poems frequently reference physical attraction, sexual longing, and the anticipation of intimate union after marriage. This open acknowledgement of desire was quite different from cultures that treated such feelings as shameful or inappropriate. Contraception was available and used by Egyptians, indicating that they had practical approaches to managing sexual activity and its consequences. Ancient Egyptian medical texts describe various contraceptive methods, though these were more commonly used by married couples to space pregnancies rather than by unmarried individuals. The social consequences of premarital pregnancy varied depending on circumstances. If the couple was already in a serious courtship, and the families were compatible, pregnancy might simply accelerate marriage plans. However, pregnancy without a committed relationship could create significant social and economic difficulties, particularly for women. Class differences significantly influenced attitudes toward physical intimacy during courtship. Wealthy families with significant property and social status were generally more restrictive, while working-class families often had more relaxed attitudes. Rural communities might have different standards than urban areas. The role of alcohol in social situations affected physical boundaries during courtship. Beer and wine were common at festivals and social gatherings, and the loosened inhibitions that came with drinking sometimes led to more intimate physical contact than would occur in sober situations. However, taking advantage of intoxicated individuals was considered dishonorable. Religious festivals sometimes provided exceptions to normal social boundaries. During certain celebrations, particularly those associated with fertility gods and goddesses, more permissive attitudes toward physical intimacy were temporarily acceptable. These festivals served as safety valves for sexual tensions while maintaining general social order. The transition from courtship to engagement to marriage created a gradual progression of acceptable physical intimacy. Each stage brought new permissions and expectations, allowing couples to build physical relationships progressively rather than having to navigate sudden dramatic changes in acceptable behavior. Medical knowledge about sexuality meant that Egyptians understood the physical aspects of sexual relationships and could provide practical guidance to young couples. This knowledge helped reduce anxiety and confusion about physical intimacy, contributing to healthier attitudes towards sexuality within relationships. The transition from courtship to engagement represented a crucial milestone in ancient Egyptian relationships, marking the shift from romantic possibility to committed partnership. The engagement period was far more than just waiting time before the wedding. It was an active phase of relationship building, family integration, and practical preparation for married life. Egyptian engagements were formal agreements between families as much as between individuals, though the couple's feelings and preferences were given significant weight in these arrangements. Unlike purely arranged marriages, Egyptian engagements typically formalized relationships that had already developed through courtship and mutual attraction. The engagement process usually began with the suitor formally requesting permission to marry from the woman's family. This wasn't just a conversation with her father. It often involved extended discussions with multiple family members who would evaluate the suitor's character, prospects, and compatibility with their daughter. The woman's own feelings were always considered in these discussions. Once families agreed to the match, formal betrothal ceremonies marked the engagement. These ceremonies varied in elaborateness depending on social class and family wealth, but they typically included the exchange of gifts, the signing of contracts, and celebrations that announced the engagement to the community. Engagement gifts were significant expressions of commitment and affection. Men typically gave their fiancés jewelry, particularly rings, bracelets, and necklaces that would be worn as symbols of their engaged status. Women also gave gifts to their fiancés, often practical items like fine linen clothing or ceremonial objects that would be useful in their future household. The engagement period served multiple practical purposes beyond romantic bonding. It allowed families to negotiate the practical terms of the marriage, including property arrangements, inheritance rights, and household responsibilities. These negotiations were important for ensuring the marriage's success and protecting both parties' interests. Financial arrangements were a crucial part of engagement preparations. While divorce was possible, marriage was intended to be permanent, so careful attention was paid to ensuring economic compatibility and security. Families would discuss the dowry the bride would bring to the marriage, the resources the groom could provide, and how the couple would support themselves. Egyptian marriage contracts were sophisticated legal documents that protected both parties' rights and interests. These contracts specified property ownership, inheritance arrangements, grounds for divorce, and financial responsibilities. The negotiation and signing of these contracts was a major part of the engagement process. The length of engagement periods varied considerably based on circumstances. Young couples might be engaged for only a few weeks if both families were eager for the marriage and there were no practical obstacles. Others might remain engaged for months or even years, particularly if they were very young, or if there were economic or social complications to resolve. During the engagement period, couples typically spent much more time together than they had during initial courtship. While they usually didn't live together before marriage, they would visit each other's families regularly, participate in joint activities, and begin building the intimate emotional connection that would sustain their marriage. Family integration was a major focus during engagement. The couple would spend time with each other's extended families, learning about family traditions, expectations, and dynamics. This integration was considered essential for marriage success, since Egyptian marriages typically involved joining not just two individuals, but two family networks. Practical preparation for married life included learning about household management, family finances, and domestic responsibilities. Young women would often spend time with their future mothers-in-law, learning about their new family's preferences and traditions, while young men would discuss their career prospects and ability to provide for their future wives. Religious preparation was also important during the engagement period. Couples would visit temples together, make offerings to gods associated with marriage and fertility, and seek divine blessing for their upcoming union. Priests might provide guidance about married life and the spiritual aspects of their commitment. Wedding planning during the engagement period was elaborate, particularly for wealthy families. Egyptian weddings were major social events that required months of preparation, including arranging for food, entertainment, decorations, and guest accommodations. The couple would be involved in these preparations, though much of the actual work was handled by their families. Gift preparation extended beyond the initial engagement gifts to include accumulating items for their future household. Families would begin collecting furniture, household items, clothing, and other necessities that the couple would need to establish their own home. This accumulation of household goods was a community effort involving both families and their social networks. The engagement period also involved deepening emotional intimacy and communication between the couple. They would spend hours in conversation, sharing their hopes, fears, dreams, and expectations for marriage. This emotional preparation was considered as important as the practical arrangements. Physical preparation for marriage included discussions about intimacy and sexuality, though these conversations were typically handled by same-gender family members or friends, rather than between the couple themselves. Young women would receive guidance from their mothers or married female relatives, while young men would be advised by their fathers or male friends. Social preparation involved the couple beginning to function as a unit in social situations. They would attend events together, host gatherings for friends and family, and begin building relationships with other married couples who would form their social network after marriage. Professional or career considerations were also addressed during engagement. If the marriage would affect either party's work or professional status, these issues would be resolved during the engagement period. This was particularly important for scribes, craftsmen, and other professionals whose marriages might involve relocating or changing their work arrangements. The engagement period served as a final evaluation phase where both the couple and their families could assess the suitability of the match. While breaking an engagement was socially difficult and potentially expensive, it was preferable to proceeding with an unsuitable marriage. This safety valve helped ensure that most marriages that did occur had good prospects for success. The culmination of the entire courtship and engagement process was the wedding ceremony itself, and Egyptian weddings were spectacular celebrations that could last for days. These weren't simple private affairs. They were major social events that involved entire communities and served to formally integrate the couple into married society. Egyptian wedding ceremonies were fascinating combinations of legal formality, religious ritual, and exuberant celebration. Unlike modern weddings that focus heavily on religious ceremony, Egyptian weddings were primarily civil and social events, though they included significant religious elements and divine invocations. The timing of weddings was carefully considered based on religious calendars, agricultural seasons, and family preferences. Many couples preferred to marry during the flooding season, when the Nile's annual inundation brought prosperity and renewal to the land. This timing was considered auspicious for new beginnings and fertile marriages. Wedding preparations began weeks or even months in advance, involving both families and their extended social networks. Wealthy families would hire professional organizers, musicians, dancers, and cooks to ensure spectacular celebrations. Even modest families would pool resources to create memorable events that honored the couple and their new union. The bride's preparation for the wedding day was an elaborate process that could take several days. She would undergo ritual purification, including special baths with perfumed oils and natron. Her hair would be elaborately styled, often incorporating extensions and decorative elements. The application of makeup was a work of art, with intricate eye designs and careful attention to every detail of her appearance. Wedding attire was the finest clothing that families could afford. Brides typically wore white or light-colored linen gowns, often with intricate pleating and decorative elements. Jewelry was especially important, with brides wearing the most elaborate pieces their families owned or could acquire. Gold was preferred for its association with the eternal and divine. Grooms also dressed in their finest attire, typically wearing crisp white linen kilts or robes, elaborate jewelry, and carefully styled wigs or headpieces. Both bride and groom would wear special perfumes and oils that had been blessed or prepared specifically for the wedding ceremony. The wedding ceremony itself typically took place at the bride's family home or in a significant public space like a temple courtyard. The actual legal marriage was accomplished through the signing of contracts and the exchange of vows, but these formal elements were embedded within much larger celebrations. Religious elements of the ceremony included invocations to various gods and goddesses associated with marriage, fertility, and protection. Hathor, goddess of love, was particularly important, as were household gods who would protect the couple's future home. Priests would offer blessings and perform rituals designed to ensure the marriage's success. The exchange of gifts during the ceremony was a public demonstration of the family's commitment to the union. The bride's family would present the dowry, while the groom's family would offer reciprocal gifts. These exchanges were witnessed by the entire community and served to formalize the economic aspects of the marriage. Music and dancing were central to Egyptian wedding celebrations. Professional musicians would perform throughout the festivities, playing harps, lutes, flutes, and percussion instruments. The music included both traditional wedding songs and pieces specifically composed for the couple. Dancing was encouraged for all guests, with special performances by professional dancers. The wedding feast was the highlight of the celebration, featuring the finest foods that families could provide. Wealthy weddings included elaborate menus with multiple courses, fine wines, and exotic delicacies. Even modest celebrations featured special foods that weren't part of everyday meals, demonstrating the family's commitment to honoring the occasion. Wedding games and entertainment kept guests engaged throughout the celebration. These might include riddles, storytelling, dramatic performances, and competitions. Some games were specifically designed to involve the bride and groom, helping them demonstrate their compatibility and entertaining the gathered community. The community's role in Egyptian weddings was significant and active. Neighbors, friends, and extended family members all participated in the celebrations, bringing gifts, contributing food or services, and helping to create the festive atmosphere. The entire community had a stake in the marriage's success. Wedding processions were elaborate public displays that announced the marriage to the broader community. The bride would be escorted from her family's home to the ceremony location or to her new home, accompanied by musicians, dancers, and celebrating friends and family. These processions could wind through entire neighborhoods, involving hundreds of people. The symbolic elements of Egyptian weddings included many customs designed to ensure fertility, prosperity, and happiness for the couple. Rice or grain might be thrown for fertility. Special flowers were used for their symbolic meanings, and various amulets and charms were incorporated into the ceremony for protection and good fortune. The transition of the bride to her new home was a significant moment that marked her change in status from daughter to wife. This transition was often accompanied by special rituals and celebrations at the groom's family home, where the bride would be formally welcomed into her new family structure. Wedding celebrations often continued for several days, with different events for different social groups and age ranges. There might be separate celebrations for the couple's peers, their parents' generation, and various professional or social communities to which they belonged. The conclusion of the wedding festivities marked the beginning of the couple's married life, but the community support and celebration provided a strong foundation for their future together. The elaborate nature of Egyptian weddings served both to honor the couple and to reinforce the social bonds that would support their marriage. After exploring the intricate world of ancient Egyptian romance, it's fascinating to consider how their dating culture compares to our modern experiences. While separated by thousands of years and vastly different technologies, the fundamental human experiences of attraction, courtship, and relationship building show remarkable similarities alongside some striking differences. Perhaps the most surprising similarity is the emphasis on personal choice in romantic relationships. While we often think of ancient cultures as having rigid, arranged marriages, Egyptians actually had considerable freedom to choose their partners based on attraction and compatibility. Like modern dating, Egyptian courtship was fundamentally about two people getting to know each other and deciding if they wanted to build a life together. The role of physical attraction in Egyptian courtship mirrors modern dating in many ways. Egyptians spent considerable time, effort, and resources on their appearance when seeking romantic partners, much like we do today. Their elaborate grooming routines, fashion choices, and beauty standards served the same function as our modern efforts to look attractive for dates and social events. Social media and dating apps have revolutionized how we meet potential partners, but the underlying social dynamics aren't entirely different from ancient Egypt. Egyptians relied on festivals, markets, and social gatherings to meet people, while we use online platforms and social events. In both cases, expanding social networks and creating opportunities for interaction are key to romantic success. The Egyptian emphasis on compatibility beyond just physical attraction is remarkably similar to modern relationship advice. Their courtship process involved extensive conversation, shared activities, and evaluation of intellectual and emotional compatibility. Essentially, what we now call getting to know someone during the dating process. However, there are also significant differences between Egyptian and modern dating culture. The community involvement in Egyptian courtship was much more extensive than most modern relationships experience. While we might introduce someone to our family after several months of dating, Egyptians involved extended family and social networks from the very beginning of courtship. The timeline of Egyptian relationships was generally much faster than modern dating. What we might spread out over months or years of casual dating, Egyptians often compressed into weeks or months of intensive courtship, leading directly to engagement and marriage. They didn't have the concept of long-term casual dating that characterizes much of modern romance. Sexual attitudes show both similarities and differences. Like many modern couples, Egyptians acknowledged sexual attraction and desire as natural and important parts of relationships. However, their social boundaries around physical intimacy during courtship were more structured than contemporary casual dating, though perhaps more permissive than the Victorian-era attitudes that influenced many modern taboos. The Egyptian integration of practical and romantic considerations in relationship decisions is something that modern dating culture has largely abandoned. While we tend to separate love from practical considerations, like career compatibility and financial stability, Egyptians saw these as interconnected aspects of successful relationships. Gender equality in Egyptian dating culture was actually more progressive than many historical periods that came after it, and in some ways comparable to modern ideals. Women had significant say in their romantic choices, could initiate divorce, and maintain their property rights after marriage, freedoms that women in many cultures didn't achieve until the modern era. The role of family approval in relationships differs significantly between cultures. While modern couples might hope for family approval, it's not typically considered essential for relationship success. Egyptian couples, however, relied heavily on family integration and support, recognizing that they were joining family networks as much as pairing as individuals. Communication technology has dramatically changed how modern couples maintain relationships compared to ancient Egyptians. We can stay in constant contact through calls, texts, and social media, while they relied on face-to-face meetings, letters, and messenger services. However, the fundamental need for communication and emotional connection remains the same. The Egyptian emphasis on community celebration of relationships is something that modern culture has largely retained through engagement parties and weddings, though the scale and community involvement has generally decreased. Our wedding celebrations serve similar social functions to Egyptian ceremonies, formally integrating couples into married society. Economic considerations in relationships show interesting parallels and contrasts. Like ancient Egyptians, modern couples often consider financial compatibility and economic stability in their relationship decisions. However, the specific economic structures and expectations have changed dramatically with different social safety nets and career opportunities. The Egyptian understanding of relationships as requiring ongoing effort and attention mirrors modern relationship psychology. Their emphasis on maintaining romance, communication, and mutual respect throughout marriage aligns with contemporary advice about successful long-term relationships. Perhaps most significantly, Both Egyptian and modern dating culture recognize that successful relationships require both emotional connection and practical compatibility. Whether separated by 4,000 years or not, humans seem to consistently need partners who can serve as both romantic companions and life partners capable of building successful households and families together. As we reach the end of our journey through ancient Egyptian dating culture, it's worth reflecting on what we can learn from their approach to love and relationships. Despite the vast differences in technology, society, and daily life, the Egyptians developed sophisticated systems for courtship and marriage that addressed many of the same human needs and desires that we grapple with today. One of the most striking lessons from Egyptian dating culture is the importance they placed on balance between individual choice and community support, between romantic passion and practical considerations, between physical attraction and emotional compatibility. They didn't see these as competing forces, but as complementary aspects of successful relationships. Their emphasis on communication and shared interests during courtship provided a strong foundation for marriage. The extensive conversations, shared activities, and gradual building of intimacy that characterized Egyptian courtship created relationships based on genuine understanding and compatibility rather than just initial attraction. The Egyptian integration of families and communities into romantic relationships offers an interesting counterpoint to modern individualistic approaches to dating. While we value independence and personal choice, the Egyptian model suggests that relationships benefit from broader social support and investment. Their progressive attitudes toward gender equality in relationships were remarkable for their time and remain relevant today. The Egyptian recognition that successful marriages required mutual respect and that women deserved significant say in their romantic choices created more balanced and sustainable relationships. Perhaps most importantly, the Egyptians understood that love and romance were not frivolous luxuries, but essential human needs that deserved serious attention and cultural support. Their elaborate systems for courtship, their beautiful love poetry, and their community investment in romantic relationships all reflect a culture that valued human connection and emotional fulfillment. The archaeological and textual evidence of Egyptian dating culture reminds us that the human experience of falling in love, building relationships, and creating families has remained remarkably consistent across time and cultures. While the specific practices and social structures have changed, the underlying emotional and psychological needs that drive romantic relationships appear to be universal human experiences. As we navigate our own modern dating landscape with its unique challenges and opportunities, we might benefit from considering the Egyptian approach to relationships, their balance of passion and practicality, their emphasis on communication and compatibility, their integration of individual desires with community support, and their recognition that successful relationships require ongoing effort and attention from both partners. The ancient Egyptians created a culture that celebrated love while providing practical frameworks for successful relationships. In our own time, as we continue to evolve our approaches to dating, courtship, and marriage, we might find wisdom in their ancient example of how to honor both the heart and the head in matters of love. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of love along the Nile. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient Egyptian dating culture, please subscribe for more fascinating insights into how people lived, loved, and built relationships throughout history. What aspects of Egyptian courtship do you find most interesting or relevant to modern dating? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll explore another fascinating chapter in the history of human relationships.